Okay, good evening. I'm going to call this meeting of the Dixon Unified School District Board of Trustees to order. It looks like we do not have any public present, but I'll give Mark a minute to check that before we adjourn to closed session.
You are correct. No public.
Okay, so we will have no public comment about closed session. Brian, I'm just trying to look here. It may take me a minute to switch over because
Yeah, no worries.
I don't see that it's opening on my laptop, on my iPad, so I may have to do it on my laptop.
Well, I got other people in.
Okay, I'm going to pause the recording right now.
Okay, we will adjourn to closed session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lloyd,
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
Catlin,
Aye.
and I'm aye as well. First one, stipulated expulsion is approved. And do we have a motion to approve stipulated expulsion case number 19.29.5 as presented by administration in closed session?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Jewel,
Aye.
Lloyd,
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
Catlin,
Aye.
and I as well. Motion is approved. Thank you. Okay, let's open the business meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the
and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and
And
justice.
justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Roll call. All board members are present. Notice the public. Persons wishing to speak to agenda items may present their written requests at this time. While the written request is optional, those making written requests will be recognized first. Persons wishing to introduce a subject not on the agenda may also present their request at this time. The board president will recognize you for the discussion at the appropriate time. Non-scheduled agenda items will be introduced at Section 10 on the agenda. Speakers may be limited to 5 minutes per topic at the discretion of the board president. In accordance with Board Bylaw 9324B, the district may tape, film, stream, or broadcast any open board meeting. The recording or broadcast may capture images, sounds of those attending the meeting. Any district recording may be erased or destroyed 30 days after the meeting. Recordings made at the direction of the board during a meeting are public records, and upon request shall be made available for inspection by members of the public on district equipment without charge. And, excuse me, for anyone who has not already done one of these Zoom board meetings, you probably have been muted. Mr. Monticello is running the meeting, and as we go along, when public comment is opened, you can either use the function to raise your hand on the reactions button, or you can type into chat, and Mr. Monticello will unmute individuals one at a time so that they can participate with questions or comments.
Hey, Luke, if I could jump in,
Yes.
chat is disabled tonight. We shouldn't have had it activated on Monday. We to ensure that all public comment is recorded and documented for Brown Act purposes. We need to have people contribute through the being called on by you and sharing that way. So no chat.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So you will need to use the reaction button at the bottom and give a wave of the hand so Mark knows to unmute you.
And if you're not familiar with that, you click on participants, and the raise hand is in that box after you click on that.
You can also click on reactions, and there'll be
Okay,
an option there as well.
thank you.
Okay, so recognition of guests and presentations.
So Kim Parrott is going to lead us through this evening. Good evening, Kim. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm very proud this evening to bring some much well-deserved recognitions to our school district. As the Dixon representative on the AXA Solano County Chapter Board, I am proud to be here tonight, first of all, to recognize our outstanding student that won the recognition this year for Dixon Unified for the Every Student Succeeds Award. And that honor this year goes to Miss Susanna Leon, a senior at Main Prairie High School. And so we are very proud of Susanna. And I know I see Yvette's still clap signal down there. We're very proud of her. She's working very hard and has worked very hard. I don't know if she joined us on tonight or not. I don't see her. But very proud of Susanna. Unfortunately, the banquet that is normally held in April, where she would have been recognized, unfortunately was canceled due to our current situation. I also have the privilege of announcing that we had not one, not two, but 3 of our Dixon Unified administrators that earned AXA Region 4 Solano County Chapter Awards as Administrator of the Year in their categories. Our first person that won this award, very proud of her. She works very hard for us every day. The Outstanding Solano County Chapter Administrator of the Year, Student Services Administrator, Adrian Louder.
Yay!
And our Outstanding Elementary Principal Administrator for the Solano County Chapter this year, Chantel McKemmon. Yay!
Yay, Chantel.
And last but definitely not least, the Outstanding Business Services Administrator of the Year for the Solano County Chapter, Monique Stovall.
Yay, Monique.
So we had 3 honorees this year, and I'm just very proud. They represent Dixon very well.
Yeah,
Great.
and if I can just add a couple of words onto that. First off, thank you, Kim. AXA is an important group advocating on behalf of students and schools in the state of California. And again, it's the Association of California School Administrators, and Kim carries just about all the water for Dixon Unified with AXA in the region. So thank you, Kim, for doing that. I've known Susanna Leon since, I think I met Susanna before she was even in school. I've known her family for a long time, and she's just a great example of perseverance and determination. And she has really just blossomed and grown in ways that everybody who knows her are proud of. So congratulations, Susanna. And then for our 3 AXA administrator recognees, Adrian Lauder is just a remarkable school administrator who focuses on all students across the district. And how she has embraced our social emotional learning programs and the wellness centers and supporting our clinicians and handling student issues with just a grace and touch that brings resolution in nearly every situation possible. So thank you, Adrian, for your great work. And Miss Mack, as she is affectionately known on that school over on Pembroke Way. I don't know if you've been watching any of the posts on the Gretchen Higgins Facebook page. I would encourage you to do so if you haven't. Well, there's Miss Mack. Good evening, Miss Mack. Just watching those things, you get a sense of the spirit and passion and love that Chantel has for her students and for her staff and parents as well. I used to, I'm getting myself confused. Chantel could run for mayor, I think, in this town and win hands down. No comment, no direct comment about politics in town. She is just so loved and respected and such the face of Gretchen Higgins Elementary School. So congratulations, Chantel. And for the newbie, the second least senior administrator, or maybe third on my team, Monique Staval, chief business official. I happen to know that Kim herself nominated Monique for this honor. And it really came from the place of recognizing Monique's, the thoughtful approach that she takes to her work, and thoughtful in both the sense of really looking at the data and fact-based, and taking the time to analyze and really pull things apart in making decisions and in offering advice, but then also very thoughtful just in how she works with the members of her department, of the overall staff, and she's certainly a big support for me as the superintendent of schools. So, Susanna and Adrian and Chantel and Monique, congratulations. You represent the best of Dixon, and we're proud of all four of you. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. Congratulations, everyone. Susanna, congratulations. And Adrian, Chantel, and Monique, thank you for what you guys do and continue to do. Okay, consent agenda. Do we have any board questions or comments on the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none. Do we have any public questions or comments on the consent agenda?
I'm seeing none.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Lloyd. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Second by Melissa. Roll call vote. Jewel?
I've been muted. Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Catlin?
Aye.
And I as well. Consent agenda is approved. You got it there though, Jewel. You got it. Okay. Stakeholder communications. Do we have a report from the Citizens Oversight Committee?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can. Good evening, Tad. Please proceed.
Excellent. Board members, superintendent, and community folks. The Citizens Bond Oversight Committee had our first Zoom meeting last night with the kind assistance of Mark Monticello. The main topic was the review of the annual report to the community. We did not get any feedback from the public as the meeting was lightly attended. So to complete the needed edits, the superintendent will schedule a meeting with Georgette Portier, a committee member, to provide some additional information in order to complete our report. After the discussion last night, it was clear what items are needed. Once the report is updated, I would like to post it online and take feedback via email, make the needed changes, and issue the report as soon as possible. Lee Coop from School Site Solutions provided a review of the actions of the Architect Pool Selection Committee for the Anderson and Tremont projects. You will hear a similar update tonight. Also, Lee presented the timeline for the furniture and equipment procurement process at the John Knight Middle School, and she'll cover that topic with you as well. In addition, we received the updated budgets for all the Measure Q projects and a preview of the future Anderson project, as it will be split into phase 1 and phase 2. Last week, I submitted an article for publication in both of the Dixon newspapers to update the community on the status of the John Knight Middle School and the issues that triggered the delayed opening. And if you didn't see it, the Dixon Tribune did publish that article last Sunday. Finally, we welcome Robert Sanchez as the newest member of the CBOC. He was approved by membership by the school board at the March 5th meeting, and we're still looking for one new member. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tad, and thank you to everyone on the CBOC for your time and diligent work in your duties, and welcome to Robert Sanchez on the CBOC. Okay, do we have any employee association report?
I'm seeing none.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any parent association report?
I'm seeing none.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Public comment. Persons wishing to introduce a topic within the subject matter jurisdiction of the district and not on the agenda may do so at this time. By law, subjects not on the agenda cannot be acted upon by the board, except to briefly respond, clarify, or refer to staff for review and presentation at a future meeting. Comments may be limited to 5 minutes per person to a maximum of 25 minutes per topic, unless extended by the board president. Comments are to be directed exclusively to the governing board, and the board president shall determine who, if anyone, may respond to the comments or questions of the speaker. If we have any public comments, now would be the time to raise your hand, and Mr. Monticello will unmute you for comment.
I'm seeing none.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, on to information, discussion, and action. 11A, 2020-2021 Governors May Revise.
Good evening, Mark. Can you give me sharing capabilities if I don't already have it?
I just turned it on. Will you verify, please?
Yes. Well, let's see.
Thank you, Monique, and congratulations.
Thank you. Let's see if I can make this happen. Tell me you see a 2020 Governors May Revise, yes?
You.
Yes, we do.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm glad our technology is working thus far. Well, good evening, everyone. For those whom I have not had the opportunity to meet yet, or we haven't seen each other except through now Zoom, it's kind of fun to see I think it was 92 when I looked at it last. I feel like I'm getting to meet more people in the community through Zoom than any other time. As Luke said, more people attending our board meetings is always exciting. So my name's Monique Stovall. I'm the Chief Business Official with our district. This evening, I will be reviewing the Governor's May Revise for you and some impacts on our particular budget. The May Revise is a revision to the Governor's proposed budget that's released in January. Every May, there's a revise, and there's more discussions after that, and then the budget is adopted and effective in July. For every budget presentation, I always show the annual budget cycle. This reviews the main points that we hit every year when we're talking about the budget. You'll notice that this time in my presentation, you see where there's a third interim financial report. We will have another budget update, another budget presentation for this fiscal year because our previous budget was certified as qualified. Therefore, we are required to do a third interim. But right now, we are at this next point, which is the Governor's budget revision, and that's what I'll review with you today. A couple things to keep in mind is that this is typically the last set of data points that we'll receive before we adopt our budget in June for next year. This year, we may receive more information, and financial experts are anticipating that there's going to be an August revision to our revenue assumptions for the state because so many things are uncertain right now because of the pandemic. So let's take a moment and talk about COVID-19 and the national economy. I would be completely remiss if I didn't bring COVID-19 into this conversation because the effect of this particular virus on not just our national economy, but the global economy is huge. and it really has a drastic effect on where we're going to go in the coming years. So with the national economy, we've had 11 years of economic expansion, but that has come to a screeching halt because of the pandemic. So no aspect of the national or state economy seems to be untouched by the virus, and our path to recovery, it's unknown because we don't have any models to go by to help us determine how we're going to recover from a near shutdown of economies all over the globe. And the actual effects of the pandemic on our economy, it's just unknown. We don't know if this is going to be over and we recover in a few months, or it's going to take multiple years to recover from this situation. I want to quickly drill down to the effect on the California economy. So for the California economy, the forecasts right now are estimating that California will suffer a $4.1 billion loss in revenue compared to the January estimates. That's about $9 billion decrease in revenue this year and a $32.2 billion loss in revenue for the following year. Knowing that so many of our Californians are needing to depend on the state as a safety net for services during this time, forecasts are that the net revenue shortfall will be about $54 billion for the California economy. So for the California budget, the May revise bears little resemblance to the January budget, when at that time the administration anticipated a surplus in revenue, and that's gone. Usually the May revise is built on the actual personal tax receipts that we get with the April 15th deadline, and it's usually built on some stable economic projections, but both of those are missing because taxes aren't due until July, so we don't know what tax revenue is going to look like. And I've already said it several times, the economy has been shaken by the pandemic, and there's no way for us to look back to try to predict how we'll recover from this particular situation. However, the governor has given us just a glimmer of hope with identifying resources outside of Prop 98 guarantee and potentially triggering off the cuts that he's proposing to our LCFF funding, should there be any federal funds that may come California's way. The other thing with the budget is that we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we do know that things could absolutely get worse because we all don't know when this pandemic is going to be over. Now I want to drill down even further and talk specifically about the virus and the effects on K-12 education and specifically our K-12 education funding. So Proposition 98 provides the bulk of our funding for school districts. What this graph shows you is where funding was during the Great Recession back in 2007 and where it went all the way up until now. The dark blue lines was the funding that we had from 2007 to 2018, 17-18 school year. 2018-19 all the way up to next year is what is affected by this pandemic. And as you'll see, the state is estimating very specifically, I want to look at 2021, that in January, the estimated revenue was the estimated funding was $84 billion. Now the estimated funding is only $70.5 billion. In the May revise, it also talks about our COLA. So the federal statutory COLA is to be suspended. Normally it would be 2.31, but the governor is suspending that COLA. That suspension of the COLA not only touches our LCFF funding, it also touches other programs that may not have been touched in the past, like our child nutrition programs and our special education programs. So that means that for child nutrition, usually they would get a little bump in revenue, and we're not going to see that this coming year. So in summary, and I like to look at information in a variety of ways. So in summary, looking at our January budget versus the May revise. In January, the governor was anticipating that there would be a $1.2 billion surplus. With the May revise, we're looking at a $6.5 billion deficit, a decrease in funding. The Prop 98 guarantee is down, as we just talked about, and the statutory COLA will be suspended. So let's look at how this affects our LCFF funding, our local control funding formula, which is the bulk of the funding that we receive for our district that we use for our general operations. The May revise, as I've said before, it suspends the COLA, but it also adds an additional 10% cut to our funding. The effective reduction is a 7.92% to the 1920 base grant funding. So when we take our 1920 funding, decrease that by 7.92, and that's what our funding would look like for next year. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, these reductions could be triggered off if the state receives federal assistance. Next, I want to get a little deep into the numbers. I hope I don't lose anyone, but I also like to be able to say, okay, what does this really mean? I can talk about percentages, but I also want to look at dollar figures. So what this table shows you here is what funding would have been if we had received that 2.31% COLA. So in the column that says 2020-21 base grant per ADA, that's what we would have received. So for K3, we would have received $7,880 per ADA, per student that attends school. However, there's a 10% reduction to that. So that's a reduction of $788. So instead of receiving $7,880, we'll only receive $7,092 for each K through 3 student that attends school next year. So what does this mean for Dixon? So the estimated decline in LCFF revenue is about $2.5 million. I'll have final projections next week after I'm able to dig into the numbers a little bit more, but preliminary estimates is about 2.5 million. The decrease to LCFF also will affect our supplemental and concentration grant funding. And because we have declining enrollment, then our decline in LCFF funding will be affected if our enrollment continues to decline as rapidly as it has been. The governor also proposes cuts to some categorical programs, specifically for us, our CTE programs. That's about a half cut to the funding. Thankfully, we have already received our award letters for next year, so we know what our funding will be for next year, but we also need to look at the following years to determine, what reductions we're going to have to make to those programs, because funding will be reduced based upon the May revise. Fortunately for special education, the hit doesn't seem to be as large. Yes, the 2.31 COLA will be suspended. However, the May revise still reflects a 15% increase over the amount provided in 1920. Our SELPA will provide more information around August about what that will be, what that effect will be for our district. Not only are we having cuts to our LCFF funding, but there's also going to be a cash shortage. So think about this. In April, we usually, as a state, receive all of our personal tax income, but that's now delayed until July. So the state doesn't have the funds to be able to give us our money. So they are implementing what's called a cash deferral. This was very common during the Great Recession time, and they're bringing it back to help California get through this particular situation. What this means is the money that we were supposed to receive from the state in June, we won't get until July. And the money that we are supposed to get next April, May, and June, that will be deferred as well. And we are still trying to find out when we'll get those funding. So what we will have to do as a district and many other districts, we're going to have to borrow cash in order to pay our employees this June. And then we're also going to have to borrow cash to pay employees next April, May, and June. And I say employees because that's, you know, the first part of my heart, but it's also our vendors. A little bit of relief is coming though. The employer contribution rates for STRS and PERS, thankfully, there have been and will be declines to those employer contribution rates. Another ray of hope is one-time funding that's slotted to come next year. I really need to emphasize this is one-time funding. It's only for next year. It's not funding we can count on for the following year to help mitigate our loss in revenue. That funding is, one source is the governor's emergency education relief fund. That's based on the number of students with disabilities. And you all may have heard of the CARES Act. And so that's the coronavirus relief funding. That's based upon typically our Title I students, and it's a per ADA basis. What's important is that these funds will have to be used by the end of this coming December. We don't think we'll have any problem using this funding at all, especially for what it's slotted for with extending the instructional school year or additional academic services or learning supports or wraparound services. Whatever we as a district decide we're going to move forward with, I'm sure that we can find something to use these funds for to help support our schools and our students. So in summary, there's 5 takeaways from this conversation tonight that I believe are very important. First, we're going to have a revenue loss. There's going to be just a significant decline in funding for our LCF funding. Cash management, we need to borrow cash to pay our employees and vendors. That's just a fact. We have to reduce our expenses. Someone once said this to me, $1 of ongoing money saved today equals $2 next year equals $3 the third year. We need to make those cuts now. As we've been discussing all year long, we need a multi-year plan. I've said in the past a long-range plan, especially since that one-time funding, it's just a Band-Aid for next year. And 2021-22 forecast is worse. And unfortunately, the future is unknown. There's still no idea on how we're going to be impacted budget-wise in the coming years. It's a challenge to have to budget for what we have a pretty good idea is coming, but it's even more challenging to budget for something that we just don't know what's going to be on the other side of that wall. But that's something that we will have to figure out how to do. So our next steps right now, we need to finalize our budget projections based upon the May revise and identify areas of cost savings. We need to determine and implement a cash deficit solution for June. On June 5th, I will be back here and I will present the 3rd interim financial report. And on June 18th, I'll present the adopted budget for next year. So this typically ends our annual budget cycle with the May revise, but as I mentioned at the beginning of my conversation with you is that we will have a 3rd interim financial report that comes in June. This report isn't as extensive as our previous financial reports. It's more of a summary to check in and see how we're doing financially. based upon April 30th information. So at this time, I am available to answer your questions, and I'll also stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you, Monique. Do we
Monique,
have
I was
any?
actually going to ask if you could keep sharing and go back the several slides where you had the five items that were impact.
Absolutely. Takeaways?
Takeaways, yeah. If you don't mind just leaving that up there
Fine.
while we take some questions and comments. I think for me, this was the biggest slide of all. So, and sorry, Luke, to jump in there.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Brian. Okay, board questions.
I actually have one if I can. Do we know yet the amount of money that we've saved? Because we should have had some savings as far as not using as much water and electricity and things like that at our sites. Do we know how much we've saved?
We don't know the utility savings yet because those bills are still coming in to know, what happened in April, what's going to happen in May. We do anticipate that there will be a cost savings because we're not using our facilities. Part of what I've been doing over the past few weeks is really trying to look at our budget and determine what our cost savings and what additional expenses we have because of the school closure. So come June 5th, I'll be able to share more detailed information with you.
Okay, thank you.
You're
And I would
welcome.
just add real quickly that I think the larger savings are going to come in some areas such as substitutes, where we've had virtually none, if any at all, since we've closed. Probably a little bit for some long-term substitutes for people who are out on leave, I think is probably the only area. Certainly some of the materials and supplies that we ordinarily use, we have not been printing copies galore, so there's a lot of paper as an example of something which hopefully is stockpiled in offices and schools and available for use next year. So I think the utilities are certainly a piece of this, Melissa, but I think in the end, the bigger money is going to come in substitutes, other timesheet activity, probably some of the other services, contracted services, consultants, and professional development, perhaps that were canceled as a result of the closure.
Brian, and one more, or Monique, one more follow-up. You talk about contracts. Are we obligated for those contracts if we didn't use them?
No, yeah, I'll use busing as the example, right? So we only pay for what we use, right? So we do have a contract with Michael's Transportation for our busing, and we are not charged for services not provided. So
okay, thank you.
Another good example of some significant money.
And sadly, although the students were not able to go to 5th grade camp, what's happened with that? Has the money been returned for the parents that
It
had?
has. Yeah, it has been returned.
Okay. Any other board questions? Okay, hearing none, let's open this up to public comment and questions. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question, please raise your hand now and Mark will get you on.
I'm seeing nothing but stunned silence.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, so I guess let's move on then to 11A2, food services overview and proposed price increase.
So Jesse will present that to you this evening.
Okay, thank you, Monique.
You're welcome.
Okay, do we have Jesse? There he is. Jesse is muted still.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, good evening, board members. Just bringing this item back for action. We talked about it 2 weeks ago on the price increase proposal. Uh-oh. Okay, so just to highlight the background about it, we are required by our regulations to review our paid price yearly, and just to see where we stand, according to the regulations. And after conducting our tool, it showed that we are not in compliance with the price that we're required to be charging. And our two options that we have is we can increase the meal price or increase the non-federal contribution to the food service account. So just a comparison of where we stand compared to districts around us. As you can see, we are, underneath pretty much everybody around us. And so what we are proposing is that we increase our breakfast and lunch prices by 25 cents, both at the elementary and at the secondary sites, so that we can be in compliance with the USDA. So last meeting, we also had some questions about our contribution to the fund and why there was such disparity, basically between 17-18 and 18-19. So did some digging around, analyzing the program, and what we found out that there was two major factors that caused that increase. One was in 17-18, we discontinued universal breakfast in Anderson Elementary. So in February of that year, we just decided that we were going to stop giving free breakfast to every student, regardless of their their status in the program. So that was one factor. The other one, which was the significant one, is the movement of the 6th grade going to C.A. Jacobs. What that happened is, our participation decreased by over 36,000 meals. Not just by that move itself, but also there was decline in enrollment. A big part of it was that move that we transitioned the 6th grade to C.A. Jacobs. And then, just like Monique said, our participation, keeps decreasing. So with that, because of the decline in enrollment, so we are seeing a trend where, we are losing meals due to those factors. And then that's pretty much what I have. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Okay, do we have any board questions? Jesse, could you go back a couple slides to that? Yeah, there is good.
Oh, yes, sir.
There we go.
Okay.
So could you just explain, I'm not quite getting, I understand the participation decrease and the declining enrollment and why that would make a difference, but why, if students transferred from the 6th from the elementary to CAJ, would that affect this so much? Is it just about the enrollment at Anderson, or is it, sorry, go ahead.
No, so there's a couple of factors. In the elementaries, what they have is we have a second chance program, breakfast program, where kids have a second opportunity to go get a breakfast, not throughout the day, but in the morning. And those times are about 15 minutes each. So if students don't eat in the morning, they have that option of going anywhere between 9:30 and 10:30, whatever the class schedule is, to get their meal. When we transition to CAJ, they have a 5-minute window. So obviously, we're not going to capture as many students in that window. So that's one big decline as far as kids participating. The other piece of this too is that what we noticed was that a lot more kids decided to participate in the a la carte than the actual lunches themselves.
Okay. Any other board questions or comments? Okay, would you go back briefly? Oh, go ahead, Melissa.
I would just like to comment, and I brought this up last time, but us increasing this is going to maybe touch on the deficit, but it's not going to even come close to correcting it. So I just want to encourage us to continue to look for different vendors or whatever cost-saving measures that we can take to help this. And also along the line, if there's cost-saving measures that can increase the quality of food that we also deliver to our students, would be really great.
Yeah, and I can tell you that we are looking at all those avenues. I just started contacting vendors and see what what best pricing we can get from them, because that is one of the big things that we can make an impact on the food cost piece.
Any other board questions or comments? Jesse, could you go back to the comparison slide of us with the other surrounding districts?
Sure.
Okay. So what is the recommended increase that you're talking about?
25 cents. So at the elementary level for breakfast and secondary, recommending to go to 175, which still puts us behind some of the districts out there. And then at the lunch, looking at $3 at the elementary and $3.25 at the secondary level.
Okay. So it looks like we would still be even or below those surrounding districts that you've shown on that slide.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any other board questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, let's go out to public comment. If you have any questions or comments from the public, please raise your hand now and Mark will give you a chance to speak.
I'm seeing none.
Okay, thank you, Mark. All right, then, do we have a motion to approve the recommended 25-cent increase in our lunches, breakfast and lunches?
I'll move.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Jewel? Jewel?
You're muted, Jewel.
Aye.
There you go. Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa? You're muted, Melissa.
Aye.
Catlin?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. Motion passes. Thank you, Jesse.
Okay, before I go, I'd just like to send a shout out to our food service staff. They've been awesome serving meals out at the curbsides at the four sites that we're doing. So I just want to publicly thank them for what they're doing.
Great, thank you, and thank you to all of your staff for helping pass those out to the community. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo Jesse on that. It's very fun to go out and watch the staff distributing the meals. They're enjoying themselves, and they know their customers really well at this point. Also, just to give everybody a sense of what we're doing in that program, today 683 meals were served in 4 locations: C.A. Jacobs, Gretchen Higgins Anderson, and out at the Migrant Center. So 683 meals, and really it's double that, because everyone who comes to pick up food gets lunch for today and breakfast for tomorrow. So it's a great job, and got confirmation, Jesse and Monique confirmed to me today that we will be able to continue this model of meal service throughout the summer. So as long as the level of participation holds up, we'll be able to keep the same number of feeding stations and hopefully feed this number of kids in the community. So appreciate the great job on this, and please continue to spread the word. If you know families that could use help with a lunch and a breakfast, it's there for the taking. So,
And just to repeat what was said at prior meetings, the youth no longer has to be there to get the meal. You just have to say it's for a child, right?
correct. Yeah, absolutely correct.
And it does not need to be a child that was in school in our district.
Nope.
And we have had those numbers grow and grow, so maybe
They're well over double what we started with. Yes, and of course we added Anderson after a little bit of time in the Migrant Center, just in the middle of April when it opened. But yeah, we've watched them grow, and today was the largest by about another 25 or so lunches. So
okay.
good stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to 11B, planning for reopening of schools.
All right, thank you, Mark. If you can enable me to be able to share, I'm gonna do that in a moment. I just want to set a little context here first. So, and it is great to see that there are 100 participants in our meeting right now. And some of those are my administrators who had to be here tonight for the next agenda. But looking at the roster, I see the names of a lot of employees, both certificated and classified, and then other names which obviously are parents or community members. So really appreciate everybody turning out for this. And the intent tonight is not to rehash everything that we did in Monday's meeting. And if you weren't aware, Monday we held a special meeting just to talk about the reopening, elements of reopening that we need to address. And so back several weeks ago when we planned that meeting and to return tonight, we said we would talk about some potential decisions to make this evening. And really we're in a place where any kind of decision about what reopening will look like is just premature to make at this point in time. So what I'm going to be asking the board for is to listen to kind of an outline I have here, really geared more around process, and hopefully provide the board, staff, and community with the confidence that we have identified the known issues at this point in time, or most of them. Will continue to discover things as we move forward, but that we clearly have a timeline and an outline for planning and reviewing and developing our specific options for reopening in later this year, hopefully on schedule, August 10th, but that remains to be seen for sure. So obviously anybody can touch on any element of this reopening that they would like to touch on, but I'm going to start this off by taking the mic for a few minutes and walking the board in particular through what I've outlined here. see how this fits and whatever kind of adjustments we need to make with it at this point in time. So if you're good with that, I am going to get myself started here. This did get attached to our agenda just earlier this afternoon. So if you are have two devices going or want to exit your Zoom window and take a look at this, you can do so. So on Monday, we reviewed the various scenarios for reopening, opening business as usual, opening in distance learning, opening in some hybrid model where students are spending some time on campus, other time in distance learning, hybrid, blended, reduced attendance, whatever you want to call it. Another scenario being opening as normal and having to go into full distance learning somewhere along the way. And we also spent a considerable amount of time talking about the fact that we need to be ready when school opens to both welcome students and families, our staff back into the campuses, but also to provide some form of the distance learning model for families and potentially staff who are not comfortable or health-wise are not able to return into the normal school environment. So that's the background. And we had a 3-page document that the cabinet team put together of tasks, of areas that we need to plan for. And that was a pretty overwhelming document and didn't feel it gave us quite enough structure. It was grouped by department. And what we know is that the work we've got going on right now crosses over department lines. It's not specific to just one department doing any one piece of this work. So what we did is we identified 5 pretty broad categories in which currently there are 5 or maybe, well, I think it's 4 to 6 bullets existing under each category title. And what these are intended to do is provide us with these 5 focus areas for the work that we're going to do moving forward through the remainder of the school year and the summer months in terms of planning for the reopening. And so just to run through those real quickly. So first one listed is the distance learning program. And major components, these are not exhaustive by any means. Major components include curriculum development, assessments and grading, technology support for students and staff, our support programs, which are very concerned about our students in those programs, and professional development. So those are the biggies in terms of distance learning program. The instructional schedule component, which could be as simple as we're coming back and following the same schedules we've had, although I don't think any of us are really confident that that's going to be something that we get to do all next year. We really anticipate that there will be some changes in what we get to do, perhaps even from the beginning of the school year. So things to consider here, and again, not exhaustive, the daily, weekly schedules, synchronous scheduling, so that's basically following a bell schedule through a day, the split grouping models, identifying and holding specific time for our students with disabilities to receive their services, for ELD and for intervention programs. Really significant that we have schedules that allow for and ensure collaborative time and prep time for our staff. And finally, the last one there, hopefully we don't have to mess with it at all, but the school year calendar. If circumstances were of a particular nature, it could be that we needed to entertain starting, well, it's not likely earlier now, but starting early, late, having an interruption in the middle of the year, some miracle of money saying, let's extend the year by 10 days or 15 days to provide more instruction. All those different kind of variables, many of which are not likely at all. So we've got distance learning, we've got instructional schedules. The next one we identified was safety planning. And this one is a huge one and so brand new to all of us. Included here, the social distancing practices, cleaning and sanitizing practices and those schedules, the PPE, so that's the personal protective equipment, areas around health and illness screening for students and staff, the exclusions of students and staff. Again, large, almost really uncharted territory for us, but a critical one for us to be able to reopen successfully. Next one, parent engagement and communication. We know we cannot make it to the opening days of school without having full involvement and feedback from our parents and guardians out there. So we would have ongoing communication through the summer months that has to be planned and carried out. Some additional surveys as we determine we need them. Process for determining program preference. You know, we're acknowledging that some families will not want to come back into the regular school program when it is offered. I shouldn't say if it's offered, but when it is offered. And so we need to plan to be able to educate students on campus and those remotely. And then the whole process of communicating and engaging parents when school resumes. So those first three bullets, I think, are all before school resumes. And then once parents come back in, we have a whole new level of communication and assuring parents about what's happening at the sites to try to be as successful as we can be. And final area, budget development and monitoring. So we're currently knee deep, neck deep for Monique, and probably actually waist deep for the rest of us, in just the standard development of next year's budget. This time of year is always busy with this. The budget is always adopted in June, but we're now layering in that second bullet of planning for reduced revenues and resulting reductions in expenditures. Working around all the issues with regards to staffing and adjustments based both on revenue and based on enrollment issues. We know we're going to have to spend more money on safety materials and staffing to address those concerns up above with cleaning, et cetera. And then, food services is, we anticipate a higher level of participation next year based on unemployment figures and declining household incomes, those types of things. And so that and probably the more widespread feeding that we'll have this summer and then continuing forward. So these are the 5 primary categories that we've identified so far. And again, the highest level kind of descriptors of activities within them. So what I'm suggesting tonight, and I'm sorry to do this to you, board, but is that we use our subcommittee model to really ramp up our work together with the board and administrative team. And so right now, and I'm going to jump around a little bit, we currently have a teaching and learning subcommittee that Melissa and Jewel serve on. We have a budget subcommittee that Luke and Melissa serve on, a facilities subcommittee that Luke and Melissa serve on. I'll come back and loop back to this safety committee. And then the board president and vice president, that's Luke and Catlin, they meet with me every Friday. So those are 4 standing bodies that we currently have in place. And then what I'm doing here is suggesting the addition of another meeting. And for now, anyway, I call this the Reopening Protocols Subcommittee. It probably needs a simpler name than that. And as I say, we don't have members determined there. So I'm going to scroll back up. And from the 5 areas above, what I'm suggesting is that the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee take distance learning and instructional schedules under its umbrella. And the Budget Subcommittee obviously takes that bullet there, budget development and monitoring under its umbrella. That the Facility Subcommittee, and our Facility Subcommittee is really geared primarily around our Measure Q projects, the modernization of the old high school, preparation for it to become John Knight Middle School, some of the other smaller projects, and then the school farm project. So they're not, that subcommittee is not really geared on day-to-day operations, but we do have some elements of this that certainly could impact our facilities, how they're being used and such. And so this subcommittee is the one that I would suggest has the least to do because we do have the safety committee next. So the reopening protocol subcommittee take on all that safety planning work. And then in the regular meeting that I have with Luke and Catlin as the president and vice president, that we would tackle the parent engagement and communication work. So essentially what I'm asking for is board members for you to divide yourselves up and we may need to look at these committees. Melissa is in 3 of these right now, which is a lot of time that she spends. Luke has 3 of these now. We've also added a board member in Lloyd whose name is not up here yet. So I'd certainly offer you the chance to be able to shuffle assignments here if you thought that was beneficial. And then, what are these subcommittees going to do? What I suggest is that subcommittees meet with the appropriate administrative staff. Sometimes that's going to include people from the sites. And I hate to say this out loud to you, on a weekly basis, with the primary purposes of us giving you information on planning details and progress, you providing feedback, you presenting questions and concerns, and then when we loop back into board meetings here, if it's just the one that's still on the screen, if it's about parent engagement and communication we're discussing, that Luke and Catlin, you would kind of be the resident experts from the board in that area, because you would have a weekly conversation with me and whomever else is appropriate related to that. So in essence, this is asking for a lot more of your time and effort in response to this situation. Let me talk a little bit about timeline and scheduling. So we currently, before school opens, we currently have 4 regularly scheduled meetings, 2 in June, first and third Thursdays, just 1 in July on the 16th, and then August 6th. And what I am proposing is that we add a meeting on July 2nd and on July 30th. So that would actually give us 2 meetings in June, 3 meetings in July, and 1 in August before school started. In no way do I anticipate that we would be making decisions on August 6th. The decision-making time, quite honestly, is probably in the middle of July. If I can't, July 30th is late. And of course, we can adjust our meeting calendar and hold a special meeting at any time, just with 24 hours notice. And so, what this establishes that we would have a standing agenda item that we could run through all 5 of those categories each time if you wanted. At the end of every meeting, every discussion, the board could make its preferences known about what items they would like to address specifically next time. Also, my Friday weekly meeting with Luke and Catlin does address agenda development, board meeting agenda development. So we have how we establish agendas in our governance board handbook. So we have a protocol for how we establish agenda items for our meetings. And there's that final point regarding that we're going to comply with the Brown Act through all of this. So I am absolutely wide open for board feedback and suggestions on making any refinements or revisions to this. And again, the intent tonight was to show you that we've got some structure designed, some processes laid out, and if they are to the liking of the board, we will get all of these up and running beginning tomorrow. Also make sure that this work is communicated out. So again, our stakeholders will have confidence in that we are working and planning to address all these different elements of concern with relation to reopening. So I will stop there and take any questions or comments you have.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Board questions?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment that I think this is a good structure. I like the board participation and I like the frequency of the updates and working on it. I think we have an enormous job ahead of us, and it's also a job that I think is going to be changing really regularly. I think it's sort of a moving target at this point. So I like this structure, and I'm happy in the committee that I'm going to be on, and I think it's a great use of our time together on Fridays. Although I think we're going to need more than an hour because we usually use more than an hour now. So
Yes,
yeah.
we are.
Yeah. So so I think it's great.
Thanks, Catlin.
Yeah, agreed. It's going to be a lot of work. Other board comments or questions?
Luke, this is Lloyd. I agree with Catlin completely. And I just have to state the obvious. No matter what we plan for today could change by tomorrow. And so our decision-making processes have to be nimble and fluid because we don't know what tomorrow's going to hold. I mean, we might find out that a pandemic disappears tomorrow, and wouldn't that change everything? But I just think Catlin hit it right on the head. We have a lot to decide and a lot of things to tackle during the next month or so.
Yeah, thanks, Lloyd. Any other any other board questions or comments?
Jewel, I think you're muted still.
I have no comment. I'm just listening.
I know, I'm trying to get unmuted.
There you go.
You are unmuted,
I
yes.
hear you.
You know, you mentioned that we will be meeting with the appropriate staff. And so I'm looking at, since I'm on distance learning and instructional schedules, is that Nick? I mean,
Nick would be leading that, yes. And Nick would not be there alone. This is, at times, this may have site admin there. We'll have other members of the Ed Services team. I could be there as well. It's not feasible for me to attend every one of these meetings, but if you recall in last week's document, one of the things that said that I would be doing would be providing the overall management and oversight of what the administrative team is doing. So it may be the same group every week. It may vary based on exactly what the subcommittee needs to talk about.
will the person that is overseeing the committee send us invitations?
Yes, we would send out, I think we'd have to adopt a set calendar, to me would make the most sense, where this committee meets this day at this time on a weekly basis, and that committee meets that day at that time on a weekly basis, just to allow us to manage our time here and to provide some consistency for you board members.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way we avoid that we need to increase our time. There's just too much to get done.
There is.
And, of course, financially, what we can do is going to be huge, and what happens with the virus is going to be huge. And there's just so many unknowns that, as has been said several times, we're going to have to be flexible in our development. So I would suggest then we try to look at the subcommittees and decide where Lloyd wants to be on these, and if anyone wants to change them around a little bit. Obviously, we have one that has no one on it yet, so I would entertain any kind of conversation of who wants to be on what, or what people would suggest.
Luke, I will volunteer for any committee that you feel I could be useful to.
Thank you, Lloyd. I'm sure you can be useful on all of them. Do you have any particular area where you feel like you're most engaged or knowledgeable? Would you like to be more on a teaching and learning budget? Or do you have any preference?
I really don't have a preference, but I have a very extensive background in budgeting.
Okay.
But once again, I'm flexible. Wherever you think you need to put me, and that's fine with me.
So Melissa and I think, are both on 3. I would be happy to let you take my position on the budget subcommittee if you'd like to do that, Lloyd.
Once again, you're the boss, and I'm gonna be where you're gonna put me.
Okay, why don't we put Lloyd on the budget subcommittee in my place?
Okay.
Unless, Melissa, you'd like to step off that subcommittee?
No, I feel like I know what I'm doing now on that committee, and I have a pretty good knowledge, and I think I would like to stay on that one. And I think Lloyd and I can, and Luke, with you being president too, I know you have extra things on your plate, so I'm fine staying on that.
Okay. So then the key thing from there, I guess, would be who wants to sit on the reopening protocols subcommittee, or whatever we name that.
I would like to do that.
Okay, so Jules got a hand up for that. Does anyone else? Should we put Lloyd and Jewel on that, or Catlin or Melissa? Do either of you have a desire?
I think I'm okay staying on the ones that I am, and I would not like to volunteer for another one.
Gotcha.
I think that's wise.
Lloyd and Jewel. I second Lloyd and Jewel on that. That's a good
Okay.
idea. Yeah, good.
So let's do that. I think that evens out some of our time commitments in a good way, and I'm sure we're all going to have a lot of thoughts and opinions and comments on safety, but you guys can spearhead that, and I think that'll be helpful to get things moving. Any comments on the timelines that Brian has suggested, or the additional meeting date?
No, I think we have to do a lot of work, so we need more dates.
Yeah. And we can even add more if we need to.
I am just giving Brian you a heads up. I will not be available for the July 2nd meeting, but all the rest of them, I'm good.
You know, you folks are entitled to have individual lives outside of your service as governing board members, and people will hopefully be able to sneak in some vacations and things of that nature. So we'll all do our best to be at everything we possibly can, but there's also the reality of having a life and having families and those things.
Okay, well, sadly, it looks like I will not be going to the mountains that I've just put behind me this summer. So those dates all work for me, and certainly with all the work we need to get done, if we need to add more, we can do.
So hearing, and thank you for the support on the plan. Hearing that's where you are. We'll begin coordinating tomorrow on scheduling, getting subcommittee meetings started next week, and I'll have Cicely begin that process of coordinating with all of you by subcommittee, and then also looping in my staff into that process as well. We're already meeting galore right now, principal meetings, cabinet meetings, and so on. So we'll be fitting things in where we can, and obviously once the school year closes here in a couple weeks, that will free up some time that currently we're spending on operational stuff, trying to make the trains run on time right now. So with that, you know, I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask for the board to formally approve this planning outline when I communicate out to staff and parents is all. I would like to be able to say that this plan and our calendar was approved by the board at this governing meeting. Again, as just a little bit more evidence or statement that we're all the way in this in terms of planning and coordinating and taking this very seriously. So just that confidence builder a little bit. So I'd ask for you to approve this as our planning outline, if you so please.
We need to go out to public comment first. We haven't done
Sure.
that.
Right.
So let's open this up to public comment. Now's the time to raise your hand if you would like Mark to recognize you for public comment or questions regarding anything on the reopening of schools.
I have Marcus Tanaka up.
Thank you. Go ahead, Marcus.
Good evening, members of the board. This is Marcus Tanaka. I'm the department chair for the CTE department at Dixon High School. Today we had an interesting day with students coming through to collect some of their personal belongings from the shop, and to kids getting their PE clothes, which I could imagine were quite interesting, and the band and so forth. But during that time, in passing and in brief conversations with students and parents, I think one of the elements that we're often looking for is what is going to be that higher authority, or whether it's through the Center of Disease Control or through the County Office of Education, what is going to be that ultimate authority that gives the final green light for schools to go back to any form of modified session, just to give us an idea of what we should be looking for on the horizon.
Yeah, I'll take that first, Marcus. Thanks for the question. And it's kind of the back in the day it was a $64,000 question. It's a much higher dollar value now. I'm going to tell you what I think is the most honest answer I can give you right now, and that's we don't know. A number of us across the state, thousands of us across the state, joined in a meeting hosted by the Superintendent of Public Instruction and CDE staff this morning, and it was billed as providing guidance for districts. And I spent some time talking to a reporter from the Vacaville paper earlier today, and I had a hard time. I couldn't find anything positive to say about the hour that we spent on there. It was political, not practical, and it provided us with no additional guidance on what's going to happen, other than there'll be more guidance that happens. We have a little fun group of superintendents in Solano County, and at times we get into texting rapid fire. And I don't know how many texts came through in that hour-long meeting. It was a good number of dozens, none of them complimentary about what we were experiencing, and a lot of frustration. Solano County Board of Supervisors, authorized the request to move further into stage 2, which was granted by the state. To me, that's evidence that there is some process in place for local government to make determinations. The Centers for Disease Control have provided outlines for the steps that have to be in place. What I can't do today is tell anybody what screening for students or staff coming onto a campus, health screening for them, temperature reading, or other checks for their health could possibly look like right now. No idea. It could be that we are tasked with having those procedures in place before we could reopen. To me, that makes distance learning a whole lot more attractive than it is on the surface for me. Not that I'm a supporter of distance learning. I want kids and staff back in classrooms as much or more than anybody else. But I don't think we can safely say right now, here is the governing agency that will make a determination about opening. And it's also conceivable that public health authorities could say you are cleared to reopen if you want, and that this governing board could say we don't want to do that. We're not comfortable doing that. We want to open in distance learning. Ultimately, what we're all coming to agree is that just as happened with closure, it's going to be at the local level with school boards in terms of reopening. So a long-winded answer, but I think it highlights just some of the dynamics here, which are well beyond our control. And frankly, in my opinion, not strong enough leadership and guidance coming from outside the district, outside the county.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That helps put things into perspective for those of us speculating on the positive side of things. On a final note, I think it's fair to say that the students that I interacted with today, I think they would much rather come back to school, even if that meant that they had to work under some tight protocols and some strict behavioral modifications in order to come back. But I think in general, most kids would be willing to do that as opposed to staying at home locked up, as most of them are. And I think that the success of kids that are directly participating is dependent upon that. So Thank you for your answer.
Thanks, Marcus. Take care.
I have Jenny up next.
Oh, thank you. So I was on the 10 o'clock webinar on the California Department of Education Facebook page today. I thought it was fairly informative, and everybody said, kind of all their concerns. It looked like the CDC had updated some of their recommendations as well, and the Department of Health guy, Dr. Chavez, was on there and talking about working on some exceptions at the elementary school level as far as health guidelines and safety protocols. Anyway, I just feel like we shouldn't have this defeatist attitude that this, the screening, it says where feasible. I don't feel like screening and just doing temperature checks, or maybe that's just asking parents to do temperature checks and checking in and signing in that their kids don't have a fever. I don't want that. Just because you guys haven't done it before, I don't think that means that you guys can't do it. There's a lot of industries that were doing things that they've never done before and coming up with creative solutions. And I just hope that you and the Department of Education and the Department of Health can all work together to try to get this, figured out in a manageable way.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. And if I came across as defeatist, I apologize. I think just the fact that we've got distance learning going on right now, and certainly it has many ways in which it needs to be improved, and that will be addressed as we continue planning. But right now we're doing something we've never done before in terms of every child being asked to learn from home, and every teacher to teach remotely, and parents having this exceptionally more complicated and involved role in their kids' education. And we had some survey results on Monday. I think you were in Monday's meeting as well. And we saw evidence of satisfaction from a good number of respondents, both parents and staff. And so, our glass is more than half full, I believe, and it's our job to keep filling it right now. And that's going to be a challenge for sure, but it's not something that we can't do. I believe we can do it.
And the checking of students and staff, that's one of the things that the guidelines that have been given in terms of recommendations, not rules, but recommendations, you know, they do indicate one of those things. The only one I've seen is checking temperatures as people come in. And of course, the stuff I've read says 44% of infections are caused by asymptomatic people. So we need to figure out a safe way to do this. And as time passes, we're going to get more and more information as we're working through all the stuff that needs to be done. But yeah, as Brian said, this is new. Everything about this is new. So we're certainly going to keep working forward to figure out the safest way to do things. Okay.
I just want to remind folks that just because we're in Zoom, we have sort of a protocol that says that public gets a chance to just sort of comment, and we respond really just to very specific, you know, answers. And then there's a time for board comment, and you know, and I feel like we're getting a little chatty back and forth.
You're right, Caitlin. Thank you. Yep.
And I just because I think I feel like the public needs a chance to just kind of talk, and maybe we shouldn't be so responsive. And so I just kind of want to throw that out there, that we have a separate time, all of us, to chat.
Understood, Catlin, but the board president does set who responds to questions. And so that was my response to her question. So.
Okay.
All right. Do we have another comment, Mark?
Yes, I have Catherine up next.
Hello. Thank you for taking, this is Kathy Michaels from the high school. Thank you for taking my comment. I have just a couple of questions going back to the committees. One, first of all, is I was also at that Facebook meeting, and I felt that they really kind of pushed back on its totally local control. So I think, you know, whether we want to or not, it's going to be a local decision. But my question is, on those subcommittees, are there any parents or teachers that are going to be invited onto those subcommittees? And the second one is, will they be open to the public?
So the board subcommittees, Luke, if I may, board subcommittees actually are a combination of administrative staff and board members. We will be continuing to take input. So we're currently meeting weekly with leadership from both GTA and SEIU. We've conducted, so that's our best avenue for staff input.
Okay.
We've conducted our parent surveys, and I think one of the bullets in there was we have to have parents engaged in providing us with feedback and input. One of the things, you know, so we've got the survey option. We've also got these meeting options, and nothing precludes us from just having a parent nights, even via this mode outside of board meetings, right? I think we're going to have to get more creative than we've ever been in terms of collecting input from parents. But the subcommittee meetings typically are kind of working meetings between staff and the couple of board members. And in this case,
okay, so it's not an input meeting.
No, it's not.
It's not. Okay, all right. Yeah. And then, so they're not open to the public.
No.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
I have Bonita up next.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm one of the nurses in the district. I'm the district nurse for Dixon. And I just wanted to share that the county nurses, we've been meeting weekly, and we've been looking at the 67-page document from the CDC and going through, putting together talking points and bullets on what we believe are essential items that we need to focus on as far as healthcare, personal protective equipment. And so we're looking at it from a broad range, and then we're going to look at our school specifically, knowing the outline, how to isolate students if needed, how to educate staff members and other staff, you know, and other healthcare personnel to recognize symptoms, and how to best effectively communicate those to parents, and keeping the community safe. So we're looking at those things. We're looking at the models that you're proposing, and, you know, looking at supplies we're going to need to purchase based on all those different factors and criteria. And we're working to be ready to present that information to you all as you are ready to receive it. So just to let you know, we're looking at those things as well as a county from the CDC perspective and from our local public health department's recommendations.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Benita. Be ready to attend some subcommittee meetings. Thank you very kindly.
I have Seth up next.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, hi, I'm Seth. I'm the occupational therapist for the school district, for those of you who don't know me. One thing I wanted to present and want you guys to think about is because I work with all special education students, and when we're talking about safety and social distancing, I guess I want you to remember that a lot of our kiddos aren't gonna wear a mask, aren't always going to do good hygiene. They're going to put their hands in their mouth. They're going to put their hands in their nose. They're going to put their hands places they're not supposed to. And my question, I guess, is how are you going to address those kids and keep our staff safe as well?
Well, Brian, obviously that's going to be part of the committee discussions, but
And for
you want to add?
No, just that would be part of the planning process.
Okay. Next question.
I do not have anybody left. Well, there's Jamie Bear.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead, Jamie.
This is actually
that's Chloe.
Yeah, sorry, we were having a family Zoom on my computer, and so anyways, I'm a teacher at C.A. Jacobs. I teach 6th grade language arts for those of you who don't know me. And I think that you guys are doing a really thorough job at trying to plan for all of the unplanned things that are going to come up. So I wanted to just give you guys some kudos for that. One thing I was sort of wondering about or just wanted to throw into the universe is I've seen, I think I've seen the CDC guidelines or suggestions for reopening. And one of them is that students should be maintaining 6 feet of distance, right? And they sort of talked about, I think, like hallway arrows and having, lunch inside of classrooms. And then in the classrooms, you need to be 6 feet apart. And one of the things at C.A. Jacobs that's challenging even now is literal physical space. And I know you guys are aware of all of that, but I just don't know if the community necessarily had considered that as well. So that was all I really had to say. And just kind of wondering if you guys had thought about it or if you will think about it in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be one of the big areas of discussion. Yeah.
I have Erin up next.
Hey there.
Hi.
I wanted to piggyback on Seth's comment about some of our students with more significant needs. I also work with students who spend a portion of their day in the general education classroom. So being cognizant that kids might be transitioning between classrooms and be exposed to things in different settings, and it's really going to be difficult to navigate those situations. That's it.
Yep, agreed.
Yep. Thank you, Erin.
I do not see any more hands.
Okay, let's give them a minute. If anyone else has a question or comment, now is the time on this issue.
Melanie is up next.
Hello, it's Melanie Sedora Torres again. I'm getting used to talking at these things now. I hope you're not tired of hearing me. Teacher at CAJ, but today I'm not really commenting with my teacher hat on. I'm commenting with my parent hat. I have a son who will be in 3rd grade next year at Tremont and another son who will be starting kindergarten at Tremont. So exciting time for him to start his academic journey in these interesting, whatever this is. And I just hope that when we think about the hybrid model, we really, really question if it's the best for our town and our demographics. I feel like I'm probably not the only parent in town who has kids in multiple grades. And I'm sure there's lots of parents and kids with, or lots of parents with kids who are at multiple school sites. And I'm already a little bit, I have to admit, panicking about what would happen in a hybrid situation. Will my kids be on the same hybrid track with a kindergartner and a third grade? I can't leave them at home. So where is that going to put me in my career and dealing with helping my 150 odd CAJ students, my other kids. So I have to say I'm really nervous about the hybrid model because I don't know how working families will be able to juggle that. This has been hard enough, and I think myself, and I can't speak for everyone, others have been lucky in some situations where they're also at home, forced to be working from home with their kids. But as Solano County moves into stage 2 of reopening, more people will not be at home, working from home, and their kids will be on this potentially back and forth schedule. I'm also a little bit worried about my sort of adoptive for the year CAJ kids. If we're on the hybrid model, things in town might still be open. Things are opening back up. Dawson's and Buds, happy to see you guys are opening back up. But that's going to be really tempting for kids if we're doing this switching back and forth. Am I going to do this distance learning I'm supposed to do, or I'm going to go see what's happening down by McDonald's, Taco Bell, and all the cool stuff? And with the quick teacher hat on, I'm a little bit worried how the teachers will juggle when some kids are distance learning and other kids are there in front of us. I mean, there's potentially ways around it, but I'm just very, very nervous about the hybrid model, and I hope we can all just think very carefully about that one. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay, Mark, any more?
No, there are not.
Okay, administration is requesting a motion to approve the timeline and process presented to us for the planning for reopening of the school year for 2021. Do we have a motion?
So move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Jewel? Sorry, I didn't hear you, Jewel.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Catlin?
Aye.
Aye as well. Motion carries. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Stay tuned. Your inbox will fill with emails tomorrow, trying to get these things, get these meetings set up. So thank you, everybody, for your willingness there. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears into something significantly different and positive, I believe. So one of the goals and objectives that we, the board, and I agreed upon was under the broad area of creating safe and positive school and district environments. And back in our PD day in August, we really focused on that broad goal. And the objective that came out of that day and those conversations that the board and I had was an objective to improve relationships and connections among all stakeholders across the sites and district to positively impact the learning and working environment. So each site was tasked with going and identifying 3 action steps, and we tried to get them to finish that on the PD day, and some had to finish up later. But 3 action steps for their site that were going to help with improving relationships and making connections. And way back when, we said they were going to come to this meeting on May 21st, and we thought it really important. Despite everything that's happened, and that some of this work was certainly disrupted by our closure, that we do come and loop back with the board and talk about the sites identified as their actions, what their implementation and monitoring efforts look like, what outcomes they found in their work, and where they'll go next with these areas. So With that said, because we do have 6 sites who are going to report to us tonight, I'm going to be quiet. And I'm going to invite Dixon High School Principal Stephanie Marquez to go first for us. And again, it's what did you do? How did you do it? What outcomes did you get? And what are you going to do next? And I've asked each of the principals to give us their first action with those steps, their second action with those steps, and so on. So Stephanie, it is all yours. Thank you very much for joining us.
Sure, and Mark, I do not need to share a document. I'm just going to run through this really quickly for everybody's time. I just want to speak for our entire site that we were really appreciative of the opportunity for the staff PD on the 6th with the whole district together and the subsequent time as a community, all staff community, to develop a plan. One of our mantras at Dixon High School, which has come in very handy lately, is try something. If it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't, stop. So it was nice to get together at the beginning of the year and try something. So we built upon our 3 current expectations that we really focus on: engage in learning, seek support, and be present. We're adding a new one to leave it better as we go forward. You know, any interaction with a person, any place you are, to leave it better. And at that meeting on the 6th, we came up with 3 action plan steps that I'll walk you through. I think it's really important that as a site leader, my role was to facilitate the meeting, and we had about 85 people in the meeting. So these plans were really, really natural to our teaching staff and classified staff as they came up. The first was that teaching departments would spend lunchtime with students in a non-instructional setting. So the first goal our departments had was to have maybe 1 department at a time out at lunchtime, just having lunch and conversations with kids. That didn't really happen as it was, but something kind of better happened. It allowed us, teachers opened their classrooms. And if you know anything about Dixon High School, that's kind of a normal behavior at Dixon High School, but it got bigger. And it also, we were able to define that classroom time as either office hour time or classroom time. And that was super helpful for us. The idea of an office hour is something that we want our kids to leave our school with. It allowed for defining office hour time in intervention conversations. So when we met with a student, we would first say, when is that teacher's office hours? When should you go in for help? And it also allowed us to record those office hours in our planners, which sounds silly, but it's a common place where kids could keep that information and plan for their week or even further ahead. And that's part of our organization as an avid school-wide school. We monitored this by just checking in while we're out with kids. At Dixon High School, pretty much every day at lunchtime, all 3 of our administrative team are out there running around with kids, sometimes meeting them in basketball games, looking at what they have for lunch and having some deep conversations. So it was nice to check into classrooms and see how many kids were in there. It looked like a lot more. And we had planned to do a survey of what was going on in classrooms right after our WASC visit. And our WASC visit was scheduled for March 16th. So that didn't happen. Our action plan number 2 was to commit to greeting at the door. And really, if you ask me, greeting students at the door to a classroom is probably the single best behavioral management system ever. It allowed us to define a positive, active welcome into class. It's the difference between having someone come over to your house and just let themselves in versus giving them a warm welcome to your home. It allowed us to create positive culture on campus and an emphasis on engaging and learning to set that tone as kids came in. And it allowed us to focus on objectives as part of organization as an avid school-wide school. The idea of what you're there for to do in that room. We monitored this by admin positives and reminders. We would shout out to our staff all the time when they had this. Sometimes we'd butt in ourselves in the door, and frequent reminders about that habit. It becomes a habit, actually. We had many discussions in adult meetings, staff meetings and everything about the effectiveness of this. When you are a teacher and you do this, You don't notice that it works, but you sure notice it the day you forget to do that. We also had a decrease in tardies and negative hallway behaviors. So we don't tend to have a lot of negative hallway behaviors, but kids are more positive. They go into class at Dixon High School this year, the bell would ring and there would be nobody out. They would be in classrooms, welcomed in the door by their teachers. A little side of this, we had quite an extensive and somewhat annoying good morning ritual with our students. There's a very loud good morning from some of our staff to our students. Hopefully you've seen on our Facebook page some creative teacher videos about good morning. Action plan number 3 was to fully engage student interest-driven conversations between teachers and students. And what that means is that beyond just saying hello and coming in, when you have those moments in class, just taking time to, you know, talk about their game the night before, or that you saw them in the play, or how's their job going, beyond just the instructional conversations. And our staff grabbed onto this one. It allowed us to decrease learning stress and build trust with students. And again, emphasizing that engagement in learning, and encourage students to seek support with adults, either learning support or emotional support with adults. This was monitored by improving classroom behavior and frequency of interventions in a good way. We did more intervening this last year, and not because kids were naughty or off task, but because teachers would notice something was up with them, ask them, and then refer them to the appropriate service or just a place to talk. The results of this were an empowerment of our PBIS team. They became quite the leaders of these activities and more on campus. But more importantly, it helped us focus our mindset for adults really accepting responsibility for and noting the positives of positive relationships with students and the effect on classroom behavior. This has really been helpful as we transferred into distance learning, a really tough transition for us. But our teachers' relationships with kids bridged that gap quite well, and I'm really proud of them for that, and our kids. With regard to the mindset, I think the most telling thing is that at every staff meeting, this was something that came up. We left room for it, and with adults. And I think a good example is Eleanor Prock-Smith, our health teacher, does an activity every year where she has her students identify the safe adults in their lives. And we planned for fall having students identify a safe adult on campus, just that person that they could go to for, it doesn't even need to be something big, but that one person that they felt comfortable going to, you know, where do I get a transcript? To, I need help, I need someone to talk to how do I get a work permit? Or, you know, of course, if they needed someone to talk to also. So we're looking forward with our new batch of kids in the fall as starting that safe adult on campus. And then we will keep a hold of those for all of our kids. And they'll get a chance to do an activity every year where they redefine their safe adult. So those are some of the outcomes of the PD. We're really thankful for the board and the district for providing that and helping us get focused in those areas. While we knew they were important, it's nice to have some plans.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Sure, I welcome any questions, of course, if you have them.
Any board questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
All right, so I'll ask Yvette Ramos, principal of Alternative Ed, Main Prairie and Community Day School, to come up next, please.
Oh, I guess I should turn on my video, huh?
Probably so.
There we go. Hello all, thank you for having us tonight. This is kind of good for us to reflect back on what we do. At Main Prairie, a lot of what we do is based on the relationships we have with kids, and their success is sometimes determined on the relationships they have on campus. Our first goal was to have a universal check-in and check-out with our kids. So we have the luxury of having a smaller school and a very dedicated staff to that. Our kids are checked in with every day, and sometimes every hour each day and each period. As a result, we did some things. We have in our shared drive, a parent communication log. Our teachers are making 2 telephone calls every week to parents, keeping them in the loop, and it opens up the communication for kids with their parents or supporters at home. Additionally, our parent liaison is making positive phone calls on Fridays, and incredible outcomes from that. The kids come in Monday morning beside themselves. You called and it was good, because a lot of times our kids, our parents are afraid to answer the phone because they think they're going to hear something they don't want to hear about their child. So that's been one of the highlights in that area. We're going to continue our universal check-in. We hope to bring back advisory in the fall when we're back in, and it will have a strong counseling component in terms of curriculum for that 15-minute check-in. Kids will stay with their advisory teacher all year long, regardless of their content area teachers. Our second goal was PBIS implementation. We finished Tier 2. Our PBIS team did an excellent job with that. The program and progress was monitored through faculty staff meetings and through the PBIS leadership team. We have, if you've been on campus, we have behavioral expectation posters, the 3 Bs, in all of our classrooms and in all of our common areas. And our kids can tell you, more important is our kids can tell you what those are. And when we do have discipline issues, which were greatly reduced by PBS implementation, if you ask them, so was that respectful? They'll look at you and shake their head no. Very clear expectations for kids. Parents were also looped into the whole PBIS implementation and process, so that was a positive outcome for us. And probably the most positive or the best thing that we're looking forward to is the opening of our wellness center on campus. The furniture is ready to go and we've got a space. Kids are excited. The county folks came out and met with kids and they were super excited about having a place to go. So that was pretty valuable to us. And our third goal, I've lost my place here, was responsible use of technology. And I think this is an issue on campuses everywhere. And as we went one-to-one with netbooks and our teachers did lessons around the responsible use of technology. We were able to implement some cell phone use guidelines that really extinguished inappropriate use of technology in some classes. It took a lot of perseverance on the teacher's part to make that happen. But after a couple of weeks, the kids rose to the expectation that we're using our technology responsibly. We had a lot of work to do in this area. So we are carrying that forward as well when we get back to school. Questions?
Thank you, Yvette. Any board questions or comments? Seeing none. Any public questions or comments? And rather than waiting for the end, if anyone has any public questions or comments for Stephanie Marquez as well, we can do that now.
I'm seeing none.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Yvette.
Thanks, Yvette. And next up, I'm going to welcome Jody Stubbe, who is the assistant principal over at CA Jacobs. She's been stepping up in lots of ways for us here in the last couple of months, which we appreciate. And Jody is going to share some of the information from her site this evening. Thanks, Jody.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. The biggest action step we had at CA Jacobs was they changed the opening of school. The first 2 days were relationship building lessons. What they did was a team of teachers met over the summer and they developed these school-wide lessons. Our staff day then focused on lessons, and the teachers were able to practice the activities and conduct the lessons themselves before they had to do them with the students. We monitored the efforts by observing classes. There was noticeably a different vibe to campus. Staff felt that it was very positive. We used the momentum to create refresher days. During Red Ribbon Week, we had some refresher days, including a guest speaker, and we had some focus on lessons that were also character development and health development lessons. And we had a refresher day when we returned from winter break. The next steps we have are to kind of reflect and revise the lessons that we have and expand upon them for next year. The PBIS team wants to level up the school opening activities and also incorporate kind of a team or a house day once a month, and then try to revise and improve our end of the year activities for all grade levels. Our second action item was to increase positive connections with students. For example, positive call home, Cougar Bucks at the student store, positive referrals to the assistant principal, student of the month nominations, lunchtime activities. For example, we were just starting our 3-on-3 basketball tournament where teachers participated with the students. Increased interactions around campus, having the staff and adults out during passage period at lunchtime. Our check-in and check-out program. Our Team Green versus Team Gold spirit competition as well. We monitored the efforts by the PBIS team was able to help teachers use an app to give out the Cougar Butts, and the leadership class tallied the team spirit points and displayed them in the hallway. Next steps is the PBIS team wants to develop school teams or houses that have a mixture of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students, as well as their teachers as part of those spirit competitions. Also, we want to develop the Where Everyone Belongs program. It is the middle school version of Boot Crew. We'd like to bring that to campus. Also next year, the Wellness Center. That's going to be a huge bonus and helpful for improving some positive connections with our students. Our third step was to support our teachers and staff to build relationships with students and with each other. What we did is we gave them time to collaborate, to develop and learn the relationship building lessons. We also had time in our staff meetings for them to practice those lessons with each other, which helped build a little bit more camaraderie and to help model the activities that we use with our students. We made sure to include all staff in the spirit competition. All staff members were given their green team bag or their gold team bag throughout the year. We had professional development from the district. Ronnie Habib, he was there that opening day, but he also came to campus, and then our teachers were also able to go and see him present a third time. Another item is that we had support for the PBIS team. They had working days at SCO and they were able to attend conferences as a team. We noticed that the support for the teachers to develop over the course of the year was appreciated by the staff. It seemed to revitalize their momentum. The next steps, the PBIS team had been planning activities to focus on improving staff culture and morale. We want to continue working on that. Are there any questions?
Any board questions?
No, thank you, Jody. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Jody. Any
your
public
work and filling in tonight.
Any public questions or comments for Jody, please?
No public comments.
Okay, thank you, Jody.
All right, next I will ask up Chantel McCammon from Gretchen Higgins.
Sorry.
There she is. Hi, Mac.
Sorry, I'm baking you guys. Anyways, at our school site, we all worked together and came up with our action plan, which was to work on our greetings, and those greetings being with our staff, students, and our families. Positive language to and about each other and with our students and families, and then interactions with each other, and making those where it wasn't just always at a staff meeting, but going outside the regular school day to interact with colleagues and not just stay in our silos. And again, also with our families and our students. So some of the ways that we achieved our action plan and made those steps were we had identified that we needed to survey our parents and see how they're feeling. And so we made sure that at our academic nights, we surveyed them, and then we also surveyed them at after conferences to get their feedback and to ask them, what do you need? How are we doing? What additional informational nights do you need? Just those basic questions that we don't always ask in a standardized way. But of our families, you know, we're about 350 at our school site. We had 214 responses back. And so that was great. And what it did for us is when we did those surveys, one of our questions, it's like we knew COVID was coming or something, I don't know. But one of the questions that we had on our survey was, what is your technology at home? Like, does your child have a computer or a device at home? And we found out very quickly who those families were. And so they were actually some of the ones that went and got a device first. So that was good information for us. Additionally, with our academic nights, we were able to see that our families loved having those for math, especially because, you know, new math is a whole entire beast of its own. And so we got positive feedback there. And our family said, hey, not only do we want to continue this, but we wanted to do it earlier in the school year. So again, good information for us as a school site. Our site leadership also conducted the FIA, which is the Fidelity Integrity Assessment that we all end up completing throughout the school year. And that also helped us identify some things. Specifically, the parent survey piece was an area that we needed to work on, so we did. In regards to the positive language and interactions with each other and our students, we had an entire PBIS day where we had a couple of our teachers take the lead on teaching what those behaviors needed to look like. And with that too came times where we had teachers sitting outside at their lunch times, eating with students and having a picnic because the students earned that as a part of their reward. We also have continued to use Way to Go awards, which is a time where our teachers identify themselves or students that we need to do a positive principal parent phone call home. And much like I think it was Yvette or Stephanie that said, a lot of times the parents get scared when we call and it's like, oh wait, this is a positive phone call, breathe, especially when it comes from me sometimes. So that was a good use of our time there. We have continued, like when I presented to you guys back in, well, I don't even remember anymore, November or December, to be school-wide class dojo or site-wide. And we have a lot of positive messages going to our families and also rewarding our students with those points and recognition. We continue to have our award ceremonies and other events in which we're communicating with our entire community via Class Dojo, Facebook, and any performances that we have. And then we also had some buddy classes so that our older students were connecting with our younger students and they also were not living in silos because we're a community at our school site. So in regards to the fall, when we come back, we'd like to continue exactly what we're doing and implement some more academic nights. Definitely continue to check in with our families and make sure that they feel invited and comfortable and that safe feeling about our campus. And yeah, that's basically it. Any questions?
And Class Dojo has been useful for distance learning, yes?
Yes, and so can I just say, I think we definitely had like a nice little leg up in this little race because most of our families were already connected. And so the only hurdle I really saw was those families that, you know, maybe they still have a flip phone or our migrant families for when they returned. That was probably our biggest hurdle. But we definitely had a leg up with at least communicating out like what our next steps were. I've just got a text message that I should mention. I've been doing morning announcements on Class Dojo for our school families, and they're pretty rocking. So if ever you want to see a video, okay, that's it.
Any board questions? Seeing none, any public questions?
None at this time.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
Chantel.
Chantel. And I will invite Tori Halkin from Tremont, Tori Peterson from Tremont, excuse me, up into our next spot.
Evening.
Hi, Tori.
Hi. I just want to start off and say if you hear some background noise of barking, I do apologize. I will try to keep the puppy quiet, but she's coming into her own of being a guard dog, so I do apologize. So back at the beginning of school year, when we came together in August, again, being that facilitator, the staff that I facilitated of about 60 came up with and, trying to build positive relationships and, what does that mean for Tremont? They really wanted to focus on students and staff. And so for students, one of the key action steps was greeting all students by name and having a purposeful greeting in the morning. So when you come on campus, and this has what did that really look like? Staff didn't really know in the beginning. And so it really grew into this really positive, vibrant acknowledgement in morning time where teachers, are just excited to see their students with smiles, and, they go down the line and, they greet each student by name, and they have a handshake or a gesture that they do with each student that's individual to, the teacher and that student, and a quick comment about, how's your morning going so far? That's very different than what, Tremont has done in the past. Another big area that, they wanted to focus on was check-ins with students. And so check-ins that they do in the morning time and in the afternoon when students leave, they have a greeting for all students when they leave. Is also the check-ins that that really kind of grew to organic of for the check-in and check-out with PBIS. Students in the beginning were kind of referred to, and Mr. Daniel at the time, who, when he was at Tremont, was that check-in and check-out person that students kind of, looked up to Mr. Daniel for. Mr. Daniel moved over to the middle school, and I became that check-in and check-out person for students who were checking in. But students started referring themselves to check-in and check-out because they, saw what it was doing for other students, and they're like, can I be a part of that? Can I get a check-in? Can I have someone check in with me? And so it was great to see students start referring themselves instead of teachers referring, because it meant something for them. They knew what it would give them. So, and that kind of grew organically. We didn't think students would self-advocate for that, but they started to, and we built upon that piece. The other big area that kind of encompasses some action steps is staff, the way staff is greeting each other. They really wanted to put purpose and meaning behind that instead of just a quick hi pass in the hallway, but making it more purposeful, spending time with each other, and having that eye contact, being an active listener, really getting to know and talk about each other, what's going on with our days in the morning, throughout the day, in the afternoon, and really working on positive recognition with each other through email, through shout out. We have a shout out board, through the district shout outs. And so building upon that piece. And so in the past, Tremont hasn't historically really had get-togethers and whatnot, but this year it was having potlucks together on campus, kind of, breaking bread and, spending time with each other. And so those are things that really started to organically develop and build upon themselves. At staff meetings, it was the check-ins of, what shout-outs do we want to give each other, what great news do we have about our students, that in the beginning of every meeting, teachers would just volunteer information, funny stories, growth of students, of other staff members. And so it was this, it's really nice to see this really positive culture, family knit culture that's has been developed at Tremont. And so those things that, as we talk about distance learning for next year, what will that look like? Because, we have the high fives and hugs and, the little certain gestures we have with our students. What will that look like for next year, and how can we build upon that? So those are those questions we have that we will continue to work upon.
Great, thank you. Any board questions? Any public questions?
I'm seeing none.
Okay, thank you, Tori.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay.
Tori. And last but not least, Rachel Ferris, principal from Anderson Elementary.
Hi.
Hi, Rito.
Hi, good evening, board members, board president, and superintendent, Mr. Dolan. Thank you for providing me this opportunity to talk about our amazing school. The goals that we had, one of our goals was to engage students and staff in genuine and meaningful interactions. We had lots of opportunities this year, and some of those things we definitely took up our opportunities. As far as one of the big things that we had this year was introducing the Leader in Me, which provided lots of moments of having deep conversations with our students about how they could interact with their peers, how to resolve issues, and they were able to have these dialogues with their teacher in the classroom, which resulted in some really good conversations and allowed them to think about how to respond in situations they may have responded in a negative manner. So that was a real positive for us. The other thing that we did this year was really geared up our student recognition. So teachers could nominate our students for a BEEP award, and it was just being an exemplary example to your to peers. The cool thing is that we did this anytime they came in. We did it in the morning in front of the entire school. And so the neatest thing about this is that kids received the encouragement and the applause from the entire student body. And so it was really fun to have parents and teachers cheer on their peers and get that level of support. One of the things that the staff really wanted to have, well, we started with everybody greets everybody. If we're walking down the halls, we say, hi, how are you doing? Modeling that behavior for our students, and then just making sure that that's kind of what we're doing with our staff as well, not just walking by because we're, you know, ingrained or in what we're doing. The other thing that we did is we presented school greeters this year, where every class for every single week was assigned that week to stand in front of our gate, welcoming students onto our campus. And as we got down to the lower grades, kindergarten, first grade, we used the buddy system so that they could have some support. And so they helped our little ones greet. We did that in English and Spanish. The families, the parents, and the kids, as they came onto campus, it was so fun to just watch them smile, the ones that wouldn't normally talk, or even just getting people out of that space. You could see parents rushing to get, you know, their child to school on time, and then there's a little one saying, good morning, and the parent just smiles. Parents, our biggest goal and the why to this one was really wanting to make our families welcomed on our campus. Most importantly, our Spanish-speaking families, making them feel like they belonged, and we were there for them. We were ready to listen and to greet them, and we wanted them to be there. So much. We've had, as far as engaging with our students, we had teachers that would have lunch with our students. They would have their classrooms. It happened more in the upper grades where teachers would have their classrooms open, and rather than the students eating lunch at their lunch tables, they actually went in and had lunch with their teachers. I would go out and have lunch with students too, and that was always entertaining, and some interesting conversations from our little ones. So really with this, our first goal was really just having students really interact, take ownership of the school, but also find their place within that school community and realizing that they're an important piece to what we do. Our next goal was on community building. So with community building, we wanted to, once again, have our parents feel welcome. and be a part of the school, realize that this is their school. It's not just the people that work there and it's a place that their children go to every day, but it really was a place within the community. So we have done a lot of stuff on social media. We have one of our teachers, Lindsay Snyder, who loves to post on Facebook and has done a great job. But the other things that we've done is we made sure that we have activities at our school or evenings that are culturally sensitive for our families. So even though we had a Halloween carnival at our school, we introduced it with Dia de los Muertos. And so making sure that parents could see that connection. So we did a little bit of an education with a little bit of that fun. So it was a really nice event, and we're definitely expanding that to, if we get to, expanding that for this coming year or the next school year. The other thing that we are doing is just making sure that our parent workshops, as I shared with you in November, when we had our parent workshops, they weren't as well received when it was like a parent education evening, but when we could do something that they did with their children and we educated them, they were definitely more receptive, as when you saw the pictures from November, or actually, I don't know when I presented, February, Mr. Dolan?
I don't remember. Feels like years ago. Anything that happened before March 13th feels like years ago.
It does. So Christmas Around the World, where we had a ton of people, we had our NPR that was completely packed. And really that was just something that was sharing things from different cultures. And our parents really appreciated that. And so we were ramping up to do some more, and here we are. So that's definitely something else that we want to continue for next year. I'm just making sure I touched everything. The other thing that I want to share is that with some of these things in the community building, our attendance actually improved by almost 1%. So last year our attendance was 95.33, and at the same point last year, we checked it to make sure, and then up until we went out for COVID, it actually had gone up to 96.24. Not where we want to be. We want to have a better attendance record, but it was nice to see that our attendance has improved with some of these things. The other thing that I did see as well was a decline in our referrals through the Swiss data that we use. And so I really appreciated seeing that. One of the things that we noticed too, and I think that next year doing a better job in targeting some of our students, but this year we had 83 Swiss referrals. So that's anybody who had a referral with a student from our TPMs all the way up to our classroom teachers. There were 83, but 15 of those students received more than one referral. So when there was a referral and one student got it, it seemed like they learned that lesson, but 15 of them, we really needed to address and work with them. And most of those students actually had some other type of intervention to address. I do want to share that we did have surveys. I had a parent survey that went out with our students, and so making sure that they have a voice on our campus. I was getting ready to do another parent survey. We did survey our ELAC parents as well. Wanted to put out another survey in the spring to see where parents were. I didn't get a chance to do that. And the staff was also surveyed earlier in the year in December, I believe, with some of the things that we've done, like with the Leader in Me, and also with their participation with our Halloween activities. Every teacher participated, which was really cool for our students to see that they could spend some time with our teachers outside of the academic setting. I think the Leader in Me was a pretty important piece this year in presenting that platform for our teachers to have those discussions with their students on things that they actually encounter each and every day. I feel like I'm rambling on, but
you're good. Lots to report. Lots to report.
So I think that's about it. Are there any questions?
Great, thank you. Any board questions? Hearing none. Any public questions?
I'm seeing none.
Okay, thank you, Raido.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I just want to offer a couple of words of a summary, if I can. So first off, thanks to all the principals for joining the meeting tonight and sharing the good work that happened at their site. You know, we invested a lot of time and money into that PD day back in August, and I do believe that it was money well spent. When you hear about some of the changes and programs that the sites were offering this year, different ways of doing business, interacting with each other, how kids were interacting, involving parents in so many ways, just an awful lot of good stuff. And sitting here tonight, it's particularly striking to me since we're doing this distance learning business. And all that good work isn't happening today in the same way that it was. Although I think there's mindset changes that are happening along the way. And you heard more than one principal talk about some of the things they had done as laying foundation for our current circumstances. And thank goodness that we had this focus there this year. And I think, I don't know if this is the right way to phrase it, but you know, that old adage, absence makes the heart grow fonder. I think we return to kids and staff on campuses together, and people are going to value this work that they did this year even more than they did before they went out. I think they're going to see that so much of this is at the core of what we have been doing, what we should be doing, and being able to do it even more effectively and successfully. So I thank everybody who contributed, which were all the staffs and the principals for their leadership on this, and hope that board members, you found it instructive in terms of some of the payoff on what our sites did this year.
Okay, great. Any final board questions or comments? Any public questions or comments on this item?
Seeing none.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to 11B3, John Knight Middle School furniture and equipment process.
All right, thank you, Luke. I want to welcome in Lee Coop, who is one of the consultants working for School Site Solutions. School Site Solutions is our project management firm. Lee has been very involved in work, especially of late, around furnishing and equipment for the middle school, and she'll get on to architect selection right after that. So welcome, Lee, and go ahead and share your update on furniture and equipment process.
Thank you, Superintendent Dolan. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
We sure can, yep.
Thank you, Superintendent Dolan and board members and everybody in the public watching this on Zoom. I wanted to give a quick update considering the late hour and go over what is the furniture and equipment process for the John Knight Middle School project. On February 6th, the board got our first update on that, and I wanted to go over with you what's happened since then, just hit the highlights, and of course talk about how COVID is affecting or not affecting what we're doing. I want to note that last night's Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, they heard the exact same report, they have the exact same memo. So we've got both bodies looking at the same thing. So on February 6th, you had an update, and at that point in time, I gave you a summary timeline. Now you have a much more detailed timeline. I don't have a share screen. I don't need that. I'm just going to go over in narrative form, Mark. So since February 6th, we were able, the fortunate thing is we were able to do a lot before shutdown. We had formed a selection committee made up of staff of the school, plus district administration. That committee did a lot of work, including meeting a couple of times and having field trips to vendors, looking at sample furniture set up at Dixon High School in a room, and were able to give us a lot of input on furniture, their needs, their wants, different ideas on furniture and the classrooms that we want to set up. So fortunately, that was able to occur. We also I had meetings with the specialty teachers and also department chairs, and we went through the site, the new site, and looked at the rooms. For example, like science, as you can imagine, there's a lot of specialty furniture and the ideas about what size of tables, what are the teacher stations looking like, and all of that. So we were very fortunate in that all of that was able to occur before March 13th, but then like everything else, it came to a screeching halt. And since then, we are finalizing the list and continuing to develop the list of furniture that goes into each room. I'll be reviewing that with district and school administrators. And we won't be able to meet as a committee, but I'm going to try to get as much input as possible on the finalization of that. We hope to issue purchase orders to the vendors no later than end of July. And then as school begins in the beginning of the year, we're hopefully going to be able to have an orientation meeting with teachers, get them their boxes, they pack up and move. They won't move, they pack up their items in their classrooms that we'll be going over. And they will have time then in November, December, January to set up their classrooms. So first off, we'll be having the new furniture come in over Christmas break, over the holiday break. And then also moving company will come in and move any existing items from CAJ. After that, then we'll gather up the boxes, we'll gather up all the materials, and we'll continue to do a board update with lessons learned after into the spring semester. Obviously, COVID has affected this. The major way is the schedule, both for the school opening at John Knight Middle School and for this kind of procurement process. However, like I said, we were able to do a lot of things ahead of time, so I feel very fortunate that I got all that input. There's other issues with furniture that we're going to be dealing with that people probably have questions about, maybe possible safety features like panels, plexiglass panels, things like that. And those are the things that I'll be talking with the vendors and talking with the school and district administration about how we're going to set those up if needed. And that really integrates, that necessitates that I really, really integrate with what you folks do on the reopening. And listening to the board meeting tonight, that is an integral part of what I have to do on the furniture. So we will stay nimble and we will make decisions accordingly. Our vendors are on their tippy toes waiting for the orders. They obviously have a lot of experience with furniture, and they're quite ready and willing to help us out in any way we need for getting the right furniture at the right time. We do want to make sure that we have furniture, not just, we don't spend several hundred thousands of dollars thinking only of the pandemic, obviously. So for example, and this was brought up at the CBOC meeting last night, Superintendent Dolan brought this up, a great example. The furniture where students are sharing. Simple case, a 2-student science desk, science table, their station. So even if you folks decide to have half of the students or a portion of the students in the classroom, we would still purchase that 2-student desk or 2-student table, not a 1-student table, because we anticipate some sort of normalcy in future, whatever year that is, when a full contingent of students can be back in the classroom. So we are looking forward on that. The other thing is, fortunately for new furniture, a lot of it's very flexible, mobile. It's built a lot of things on wheels. And so those classrooms will be able to move quite readily and not like the clunky old stuff that was out there before in years past. We recognize that spaces may be used differently. And so we'll stay nimble on that as well, and just watch for what you folks do and the decisions you're making, reflect back on that, talk about the implications, and make those decisions correctly. And that is it. We know that the teachers are going to, they all along were going to need to clean their, purge their classrooms of items that they no longer need. It's a great opportunity to do that. They will be provided with the dumpsters, the toters, and that will happen in the fall, late in the fall, as they get ready for the move. And they would be, then they take all their personal items home, and then the moving company moves stuff into the classrooms, and they unpack and hand back the boxes. So I'll take any questions on that. That's a quick overview, but you have a very detailed timeline.
Thank you, Lee. Any board questions? It came up last night whether the COVID epidemic is going to affect the ability to actually get the furniture, but you said last night, at this point, you haven't been told anything by any of the vendors that this should impact our ability to get the furniture?
Correct. So far, we have heard nothing about supply chain problems.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, let's open it up to public comment. Any questions or comments from the public?
I'm seeing none.
Okay, thank you, Lee.
Welcome.
Okay, let's move on to 11B4, selection process for our architectural engineering services pool.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. Again, Lee Coop with School Site Solutions. This is actually an information discussion and action item. We'll be asking the board for approval of the committee's recommendation for an architect pool. You have a memo in front of you, again, a pretty detailed memo talking about what the process was for selecting a new architect pool. I want to thank the
We lost your feed.
You're muted, Lee,
There you
somehow.
go.
There you go.
Going in and out. Sorry about that. Jim Bombachi and I from School Site Solutions, and Mark, the inimitable Zoom host. We held interviews after getting 15 responses, statements of qualifications to our RFQ. And we held interviews on May 6th, and we had follow-up reference calls. And we, the selection committee, I'm saying on behalf of the selection committee, we're recommending to you 3 architectural firms to be part of the architect pool. This is for both Measure Q and non-Measure Q projects in the future. The firms that we're recommending are Architecnica, they're a firm out of Stockton, Rainforth Grau Architects, which is they are known by their acronym RGA. And then we are recommending that we grandfather LPA into that pool. They're the architects currently working on the John Knight Middle School. Tad Smith or Brian might be, or Luke might want to speak on this as well, but I think we have a good selection of a small, medium, and large firm. And we did hold these interviews over Zoom, and that was a new experience for, I think, all of these architectural firms. So we interviewed 4 firms, and also for me as well. And I think it went pretty well. So I want to thank the committee for the time, and you have a memo and you have an updated timeline. I would note that we are not asking us to start asking your approval for us to start negotiating contracts yet. We have some preliminary scoping to do that we can do without spending money on architects. And but soon we would be asking, if you approve this pool tonight, we would be asking for authorization to negotiate contracts at a future meeting, and then approve contracts themselves at a future meeting after that. So I would take any questions or comments.
I'm not sure, because we lost your sound for a minute. Would you just restate who all was on the committee and what it means when we've approved an architectural firm for the pool?
Yes, and I'm sorry, my apologies for any muting. I do want to thank the selection committee, which was made up of Luke Foster from the board, Tad Smith, the chair of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, Superintendent Dolan, Jim Bombachi, and myself from School Site Solutions. And then Mark Monticello, our Zoom host, was a big part of it as well. We interviewed 4 firms.
Great, thank you. And once the architects are in the committee or in the pool.
Right. So we want to have an architect pool that's approved by the board. That allows us to pick from that pool for future projects. So instead of going out for, let's say if we only wanted to have one architect at a time, we would have to do this whole process over again with sending out RFQs, doing everything over again, one architect at a time. So what is a very efficient and effective way for a school district to do this is to have a pool available. That also allows us to very much look at what the capacity and workload of those firms are and be able to be very selective on who we would want to assign to each project to. So it allows the district to have great flexibility and being able to use any of those architects in the pool.
Great, thank you. I don't know if Tad is out there. He wants to add anything. Tad, if you're there and you want to, please raise your hand and Mark will unmute you. You there, Tad?
Yeah,
We got you.
Go ahead, Tad.
So I just want to thank the school board for including me in this process. It was very helpful, informative, and just another way of the district reaching out to the citizens to get input. So it was much appreciated. The whole process was very fair to all of the architect firms that presented to us. They all spent a lot of time, both preparing a very large pamphlet that we got as a PDF, and also we had the Zoom format to interview them. So the firms spent a lot of time and the committee spent a lot of time, and I thought it was a good process. I think the citizens of Dixon will benefit by having this nice pool of potential architects. So thank you.
Thank you, Tad. Brian, anything else you'd like to add?
No, we ran a great process, and I think we're really satisfied moving forward with your approval. Like she mentioned, LPA, a large firm we've been working with, adding a smaller and a medium-sized firm into the mix just gives us a lot of flexibility moving forward.
And thank you, Lee, for getting such qualified applicants. Any board questions about the architectural panel? Hearing none, any public questions or comments on this?
I have Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
Mike, who's Mike? I don't know who that is. Hey, if LPA is our current architect, I would want them removed. It's just way too many oversights on this. If I had to pick 2, I would say the door entries of all the buildings or of all the classrooms and the ramp between A wing and B wing. I wouldn't recommend using them again. Those are things that are clear sight and clearly within an architect's ability to be able to draw out for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else?
I'm seeing none.
Okay, so do we have a motion on approval of the process for the architectural engineering services pool?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Jewel?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Catlin?
Aye.
Aye as well. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, on to 11B5, update board policies and administrative regulations.
All right, so I'm going to make these as quick as I possibly can. Item number 5 is for the July set of policy and administrative regulation updates. I reviewed those with you last time, providing you with a brief description of each topic and the policy or regulation number. You did not express any questions or concerns on any of those policies at that point in time. So I'm essentially going to say if you want to waive the reading and approve these, they were all based on updates tied into new regulations or new law. None of them were particularly controversial or troubling in any kind of way.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Do we have a motion to waive reading and approve item 5?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Jewel?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Catlin?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. Thank you. Motion.
All right, so the next item is the same as the last one. This is the October set of policies. This was shared in the same way as the previous item back at our last meeting. Again, all these related to new law or updates of existing policy or regulation. You had no questions or concerns on any of these items. So again, would ask your approval.
Brian, I probably should go back. I didn't ask for public comment on that
Oh,
last.
sorry. Yeah, sorry, Luke. Yep, please do.
So let's open up item 5 for public comment. Is there any public comment with regard to item 5, update of board policies and administrative regulations?
I am seeing none.
Okay, thank you. So we've already voted on that. So let's move to item 6. Are there any public comments or questions about item 6, update of board policies and administrative regulations? Mark, I assume none?
Still none, yes, correct.
Oh, okay, that was on 6. Okay, so are there any board questions or comments on number 6? And if not, do we have a motion to waive reading and approve those policies and regulations?
Move to adopt item 6.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Jewel?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Catlin?
Aye.
Aye as well. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, number 7.
All right, thank you. So I will run through these as it is a first read with a brief description of each of them. And holler along the way if you have any questions. But again, looking at my notes, each of these is tied to either a new piece of legislation or an update to regulations. So nothing of a controversial nature here. So board policy 2121 relates to superintendent's contract, limiting the term to no more than 4 years. Board policy 3600 is related to consultants and creating a 3-part test to determine whether the person is an employee or an independent contractor. AR 4030 relates to non-discrimination in employment, and that's tied into two laws, SB 778 and AB 9. BP 4033, lactation accommodations tied to a new law. This requires us to provide a lactation room private space and such, which we've already implemented. Board policy 41, 51, 4251, and 4351. This is related to compensation, employee compensation, and this is just an update for exempt employees, those who are not salaried, such as not hourly workers, classified employees in particular. BPAR 4218 is on our list, but we do not do that one because we are not a merit district, merit system district. So it's listed, but doesn't apply. BPAR 5116, they finally got rid of the language that you could transfer based on the old API, the Open Enrollment Act. Finally, after all the years of not having that, that's eliminated. So it just streamlines transfer provisions a little bit. 5117 is on interdistrict agreements. And this is based on a new law requiring districts to provide transportation for students who are victims of bullying or children of active duty military. 5118 is an update on intra-district transfers. 5125 is a new laws tied to AB 711 regarding students who submit a change of gender identification. BPAR 5131.2 reflects a new law requiring approval of interdistrict transfers for students who've been bullied. 5141.21, administering medication and monitoring health conditions. Just make a mention of this. This reflects, like I say, new law, which allows for students to be treated with medicinal cannabis medications while at school. And this particular policy had option 1 and option 2. Proposing that we go with option 1, which says that the parent administers the medication. Option 2 would allow for staff to do so. And it's our belief at administrative level that we would like to have a parent responsible for that and not involve staff in any way. So that's proposed with option 1. And I would, if there's any quick question or comment on that, I would take it. Otherwise, keep rolling on. All right, seeing none. Courses of study updates some language via new law around foreign language changes to world language, and you've got family and consumer sciences as the new standard for homemaking or home ec. I'm glad to see 6154, it's a change in law which requires for suspensions of 2 or more days that the homework has to be provided to a student upon request. Previous language was that it was optional for the teachers as to whether or not to provide. So this is a better thing for students. 6174 is a revised regulation catching up with the master plan and federal monitoring program regarding reclassification and redesignation of English learners. 6175 is new law requiring enrollment of migrant students immediately, regardless of fees or other issues that they may have, and remaining in their school of origin. And finally, 9150 is a board bylaw, which requires that student board members can be appointed to board subcommittees in the same way that you folks are. So those are that December set, and I am happy to take any questions you have on any of those.
Great, thank you, Brian. Any board questions? Hearing none. Any public questions?
I'm seeing none.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, do we have a motion to approve number 7, board policies and administrative regulations?
Actually, this is just first reading, Luke.
Oh,
So, yeah,
not an-
this is just info discussion.
Oh.
We'll bring it back next time for action.
Great, thank you. Okay, so
bet.
number 8, also just discussion. Go ahead.
Same thing, yes. So I'll just do the same thing here. Try to move quickly. There is one board policy that I would like to get some feedback from you on. Running through the list, board policy AR 0420.4 relates to new laws regarding charter school authorizations. Some pretty widespread update of law that took place. 1, 2, 3, 4 different pieces of legislation that are driving the revision to the policy in AR. BP and Exhibit 0420.41 relates to charter school oversight. And again, this is based on it's 8 or 9, maybe even 10 separate new pieces of legislation regarding oversight of the charter schools. And continuing in a theme, 0420.42 reflects new laws to charter school renewals. And 0420.43 relates to new policies regarding charter school revocations. So a bunch of policy there, all related to charter schools, and all, again, based on new legislation. So 3471 on parcel taxes is just an update on requirements for administering parcel taxes out there, including who may be exempted from doing so. 3551 food service operations cafeteria fund kind of reaffirms and restates based on new law the inability to, our requirement to feed students regardless of a student owing money for lunches, any of that kind of thing. So that was SB 265. Certification. This is a policy related to hiring, and if we are hiring with a waiver or other circumstance, so some guidance on how that has been modified. 41, 12.9, 42, 12.9, 43, 12.9. This policy reflects an update of all of the employee notifications that we have to make on an annual basis. BPAR 5141.52 reflects new law, two different laws regarding suicide prevention, both having policy and requirements about posting and communicating policy. And 5144.1 is the policy I wanted to talk about a little bit. Part of this reflects the previous conversation about providing homework during a period of absence. But there is an option in this policy related to 48900 Section K of the Education Code. And currently, there are restrictions on suspending students based on disruption or willful defiance. And that currently is for students in the lower grades. The new law reflects the change for 4th through 8th graders. And so option 1 reflects that K through 8 prohibition of suspension. Option 2 actually extends that out to say that no student, so regardless of grade level, no student may be suspended for disruption or willful defiance, except by a teacher pursuant to Education Code 48910. We commonly refer to that as class suspension. And it does allow a teacher to suspend a student from class for a period or 2 periods. Typically, this happens only in the secondary setting. So it could be for today and tomorrow, with a requirement that the teacher provide notification to the parent immediately as well. So you will always retain that right for class suspension. However, the question for you is, do you wish to prohibit students in grades 9 through 12 being suspended for disruption or willful defiance? My own view on this at this point in time is that we do not abuse this language for suspensions for willful defiance in the district. I think once upon a time, these 48900K suspensions were kind of out like Halloween candy, that if you showed up at the right time, at the right place, you were to get one of those suspensions. For us, those numbers have dropped down to the level where they should be. So I don't feel the need to adopt policy saying that those 9th through 12th graders would also be exempt for this suspension for disruption or defiance. But if it's the board's preference to prohibit this all the way through 12th grade, I've got no problem with that whatsoever. So take some direction from you on this one, please.
So I know a little something about this bill. I had testified in the committee, in the education committee on this bill. And I would just say that I'd like to leave as much flexibility for our administrators as possible. I think that it's important that as a board, we don't, we're not in the classrooms and we're not at the schools. And I think we should leave as much flexibility as possible and allow our administrators to make individual decisions. And I agree that especially in our school district, this is not something that's particularly abused.
Yeah. So that would result in us following option 1.
Yes, I agree with Catlin on that.
I agree as well.
And,
Okay.
and also.
Great. I will take that as direction, and we will move forward proposing this with option 1, hearing the consensus of the board. Thank you for that. Next is a change in law, change of policy related to law on concurrent enrollment in college classes. So again, just adhering to some updated law. So that is that set. And again, we'll bring this back for your approval next meeting, with the only point of interest being the option 1 on that suspension language.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brian. Any public questions or comments on that item?
I'm seeing none.
Thank you. Okay, so on to agenda items for future meetings. Any board agenda items for future meetings? Hearing none. Board announcements. Jewel, any announcements?
Well, we met, the Seroptimus Scholarship Committee met and selected 7 high school seniors that applied for the Seroptimus scholarships, which will be at $1,000 each. And the young women will be notified shortly.
Great, thank you. Lloyd, any announcements?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Melissa, any announcements?
No, thank you.
Catlin, any announcements?
No.
And none from me. Okay. Coming events, June 3rd, Main Prairie High School graduation parade. I'm sorry, June 3rd, Main Prairie High School graduation parade. June 4th, board meeting. June 6th, Dixon High School graduation parade. Do we have Brian, anything else?
No, not that I can think of in my current tired state.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I as well. Motion adjourned, or meeting adjourned. Thank you. It
Tired
is.
too.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Who's
Bye.
tired?